webinar. We have still colleagues joining, which is great. In total, we have over 130 people, 130 people registered. So people are still joining in, so feel more than welcome, colleagues. A first webinar in a series of three. I will come into this in a second, if you allow me. And I see a lot of familiar faces and names also today. Familiar faces and names that we also saw in the previous webinars that we organized as the OC Sigma in the course of last year. Some of you colleagues might remember and recall that we organized a webinar series related to live events and seamless service delivery. Because of the extremely positive feedback that we received on these, we decided to again take up the initiative to continue with this series. So this
Sorry, you muted, Nick. Can you unmute yourself?
This series of webinars that we are hosting in the course of this spring couple of months will be dedicated to what we call citizen-centric public services in the Western Balkan region. And this first one, where we are gathered today, will focus on specifically service design and user experience, as you have all seen in the agenda. As said, this is the first one that we are holding, because, and this is already the announcement that many of you also have seen, but this is just a little commercial in between. We have scheduled the second and the third webinar, as you can see, on the 31st of May and the 2nd and the 5th of July. The second one will be focusing on digital identity and trust services. We are in the full process of finalizing the agenda. So in the course of the next, let's say, week or weeks, we will also send you the concrete invitation with the full agenda for this one. And then the third one and the last one for the moment, scheduled on the 5th of July, where we will focus on service standards, monitoring, measuring satisfaction, measuring perception, measuring quality. That will be the topic or the topics of the third webinar on the 5th of July. So please watch and follow us closely via all the channels. But by registering for this first one, we will also keep you in the loop and keep you informed with the detailed agendas and invitations. So you will see us coming. Now, why organize a series of webinars on this topic of, well, citizen centricity and citizen orientation? As most, if not all of you have seen our monitoring reports that as the OECD Sigma we carried out the course of the second half of last year, this service delivery element was and is quite prominent. And happy to say that the service delivery topic overall in the region did fairly well over the past couple of years, the period of 4 years that we cover in this monitoring reports. Now, one thing that we've seen is that definitely digitization has become really at the forefront. So progress has been made, definitely, in all the countries in the region. But progress also there has been, let's call it uneven, and we have called it uneven. Uneven to the extent, and this is just some overall image that you can also find on our wonderful data portal, that the attention in the countries, in your countries, very much has been focused into, let's say, doing business or simplifying, digitizing processes, procedures towards the life of businesses, which is good in itself, of course. But on the other hand, many of the processes, procedures, administrative services towards users as citizens, there is still quite some work to be done. Again, this is just an overall image, In some countries, the picture is more bright than in others, but overall, across the board in the region, the attention to, well, the citizen orientation and the citizen centricity in simplifying and digitizing, because it's not only digitizing, and simplifying and digitizing, and there is still quite some work to be done. So this was the first starting point for us to say it might be good that we put a bit of attention by means of this series of webinars on this particular topic. But this also reflects, of course, to some of the perception of quality of public services by citizens. This is Balkan Barometer data, as many of you are also familiar with. The latest figures, 2021 compared to 2017. Regional average, more or less stable over these 4 years. But then we can see that among the countries, there is quite some variety. Some positive trends, definitely, that we need to highlight, but also some less positive and even, well, digressing trends to very strong extent. So this is something to carefully look at and look after. So again, one more reason to really put this topic of citizen focus, citizen orientation, and then the topic of today, the service design, really as really at the forefront, and that was. So moving into the really the meat and the core of today's session, this is the agenda that all of you, when signing up, have seen. Just quickly taking you and talking you through before passing the floor to the speakers. We start with good friend and colleague Bruno Montero. Bruno will focus on his experience from the past as a director in the Lab X in Portugal. Lab X, the innovation, creativity, policy experimentation lab of the Portuguese government, really, well, state of the art, I think we can say. So Bruno will bring in his experience from there, but also in what he is lately doing, because Bruno joined the OPSI, the Observatory for Public Sector Innovation within the OECD, like a year ago, but Bruno will explain this more into detail. So Bruno will focus on the concepts, but also illustrations of this citizen-centric design, user experience in public administration overall. After that, Bruno's story will be complemented nicely, I would say, with the presentation from Jolien. Jolien Kouwenhoven. Jolien is a service designer at the Belgian Ministry for Social Security. And in that capacity, Jolien and her team and colleagues have been working on applying design thinking in redesigning services for a very particular group of users, namely for disabled people and persons which they serve as the Ministry of Social Security. So we come back with Jolien into details to that extent. After that, we are really pleased to have also Marina Banovic with us, State Secretary in Montenegro, the Ministry for Public Administration, Digital Society and Media, where they are doing really interesting work as we speak in using design approach in the new web services. So I think that will be another really revealing insights, again, on a very particular aspect of service delivery in one of the countries in the region. And to, let's say, conclude, after having some in-depth presentations, we have scheduled a more reflective and a kind of overview and insights presentation from the colleagues from the from CEP and Weber. So Milos will share some reflections and their insights on the user centricity and their findings on their work with Weber in the Western Balkan region. We will foresee some overall discussion and questions and answers towards the end of the session, goes without saying. But at the end of each and every individual presentation, we will also open up the floor for your immediate and urgent and burning questions. So please collect your questions and we will try to moderate the best as we can in allowing you the floor. We have full interpretation that will help the discussion. So I think with this, from my side, we would be ready to kick off. So with any further ado and perfect on time, I would kindly hand over the floor and screen to Bruno for his insights and his presentation. So please, Bruno, you can take it away.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Nick, for such a presentation and for having me again in these Sigma sessions, these webinars for the Western Balkans countries. I want to also welcome everyone that joined us today. I hope to have a compelling and I hope so a presentation that ignites the discussion, because I really think that's the most valuable moment that we can have today. It's exchanging questions, exchanging ideas in the round table or in the moment for the questions at the end of my presentation. So as Nick let you know, I joined OPSI, the Observatory of Public Sector Innovation, very recently, 6 months ago, as a matter of fact. And in the previous years, I was coordinating the Experimentation Lab for Public Administration. That is a safe space for researching, co-creating, and experimenting public services in Portugal, be them digital or not. So I will say that I have some experience from the trenches of public sector innovation that I really want to share with you today as well. In the last participation I have in a Sigma webinar, I get the sense that we have a very action-oriented audience. We have people that are really doing innovation in their context. And today's presentation is very much focused on stories from different contexts. So if I have to use concepts, they will be concepts in context. And of course, they are very particular cases, but I hope these particular cases can, at least by comparison, enable us to exchange some words in the end and at least motivate you to share some ideas and some comments today. So I was really glad to see the improvements that were registered in the last 4 years that Nick just showed us, because I really think we are probably reaching a point where we need to introduce new approaches, new methodologies, new tools that can ignite a new phase of development for the region. I really think it's a very interesting moment, because if we are simplifying, if we are doing simplification, if we are de-bureaucratization of the administration, we are doing a great work already. And now maybe we can give a nudge to our approaches and improve its user centricity and the way we are designing and delivering and assessing our public service. I have a short presentation I want to share with you. I hope you can all see it right now. Great. So just to start, a very short introduction about what the Observatory of Public Sector Innovation is. It's an OECD unit that helps governments in translating innovation principles into practices. So OPSI provides strategic guidance, but also very specific support to help governments embrace innovation and effectively answer to the ever-changing needs and challenges that our uncertain reality is always creating. And OPSI has different work areas. I won't go into detail, but I invite you to discover the website, as you probably know, maybe some of you already, and to take a look on the systems approaches, on cross-border governance. That seems a very interesting topic also for this region. Anticipatory innovation, innovation missions, or innovation management. There are some of the work areas that we are working on. But also, if you are searching for useful resources, please take a look on the Toolkit Navigator that gathers hundreds of toolkits and instruments that you can use on your own projects. Or the case study library, because sometimes sharing lessons, sharing failures, sharing successes is a good way of promoting our own innovation initiatives. Or maybe take a look on the Behavioral Insights Knowledge Hub. It's an opportunity to take a look on this very specific but promising area of policy making that uses behavioral insights to promote I will say, better lives in our country. Just to start remembering that innovation, it's a multifaceted reality. We can have innovation that proceeds with very certain contexts, very secure contexts, where we are just trying to enhance the solutions that we have already and that have proven useful for our citizens. But innovation can also operate under uncertain, complex realities. And in that case, it's not enough to improve what we have. We have to start thinking about what are the emerging trends, what are the key challenges that the future will bring to us. And in this case, we cannot just enhance present-day solutions, ready-made solutions. We have to try to anticipate what is to come, adopting a prospective and proactive approach. Of course, innovation can be directed. It can be top-down. We can define a priority and work towards that priority. In that case, we will have a mission, and we will work all together to attain a certain mission. But also, innovation can be adaptive. That means we can be answering bottom-up pressures that came from society and engaging in these kind of improvements. So to start with, innovation is a very complex reality, has different facets, as OPSI has stated in this model, and we should take this into consideration in my next slides. So I am sharing some examples that can be approached using very different lenses. And in that case, I will gladly answer any question, any doubt that may arise during my presentation. I just want to pitch some interesting ideas around service design and citizen centricity. So if we are to have a very simple model to introduce how public service design can be used to promote changes in the sense of granting services that are evidence-based, that take into consideration user experiences, and also integrate assessment and evaluation, we can have, I will say, hundreds of possible models. I will just present one very simple version of how we can see public services design. Probably Jailin, that is an expert, could, of course, introduce much more ideas and concepts to this very simple model. So when we are approaching a service, it's really important that we start with an exploration. Instead of assuming that we know perfectly what citizens want or what is really needed to solve a given challenge, it is really important that we can engage in an exploration, researching and using evidence-based approaches to understand what are really the challenges that we have at hand, to try to really understand from the point of view, from the experience of the citizens, what are their needs and expectations regarding a given public service. We also need to take into consideration that it is not enough sometimes to jump into a given solution without starting to mapping the existing services and try to understand where are the bottlenecks, where are the red tape to be cut before any kind of approach of that kind. A second moment, I will say, even if this sometimes it's very interrelated, it's a co-creation. It is not enough for us to have experts, even if they are the most qualified experts, to design services without taking into consideration the multiplicity of partners that are engaged in a given service creation. We are not just multiple public organizations sometimes working together in a public service, and especially in a life event, for instance, but we also have very different segments of the society that is sometimes touched by the same and by a single service. So co-creation will enable us to connect with all these partners and to generate ideas profiting from this collective intelligence that is already in place. So the adoption of participatory and collaborative methods will be a very important feature at this stage. After that, after we are heading to a solution, before implementing in a I will say, very magnanimous way, whatever we have reached, I will say that it is important to experiment. Test before implementation it's quite important, because you will benefit for having a controlled environment where you can control your risks, where you can control the expenses that you are making with your new solution, and see how it works. How it works primarily for users. Are users being satisfied? Are users experimenting a good, are providing a good feedback from their contact with these experimental services? Are we seeing and detecting new problems that we have to solve before implementing a service? So all these kinds of lessons will come from experimenting. And let me tell you from my previous experience in public administration, it is better to understand that the service don't work if we have a pilot and we can control the visibility, if we can control the expenses that you have, than implementing a service and then discovering that by just a single problem, we will create 3 months, a 3 months delay in solving it. And we will create not just a communications problem, but also we will create an expectations problem among our citizens. And this comes from a real case. So. And finally, when we go to the implementation, we have to assure that we are assessing our services. It is not enough to launch the service in the world without creating ways of monitoring the performance of the service and gathering feedback and input from users, because that feedback and that input from users will be important to start over again our cycle of improvement of the service. There is no service that is once and for all perfect. A service can work today, but we need to ensure that we have the means, we have the tools already in place to ensure that we are all the time getting knowledge, getting information from the users, so we can start over again this cycle of improvement. Now, I will just try to share with you some stories, 4 stories, 1 story for each of these 4 steps. And as I told you, this 4 steps journey is open to discussion. There are hundreds of different models. It's just a way of in a very simple way of presenting and introducing some of the things I really want to share with you. So for the exploration, a very interesting example I like to share, because it's a very simple example. It don't cost a lot. It's really quick to do, and it provides an immense amount of information, of useful evidence, was the work that USAGov, that, as you know, is the web portal for the United States federal government. So it's a massive platform. And when they were thinking back in 2015 about improving and updating their platform, one of the options they have used was to build journey maps with actual users. A journey map is just trying to identify what are the successive points of contact of a user with our service to do a given task. And for each of those contact points, try to map what are the pain points, what are the experience, what are the procedures that users are doing. And by doing that in a very simple and quick way, try to identify improvements and to ensure our service will be inclusive, will be accessible, and will be usable for all kinds of users. And this is interesting because this enables that the research is a kind of grassroots approach. We don't have just to use a kind of data. We can combine different kinds of data. So we can rely, for instance, in the analytics that we already have for our service, if it is a service that we want to improve, or we can combine different research methods. If we are trying to create a service from anew, we can combine more, I will say, qualitative-oriented methods that interview or that do even ethnographic approach with users, or more quantitative data analysis approaches. So we have plenty of methods that we can use, and it will be important to use data that translate the experience and expectations and needs that came from the people that we want to serve, because we just don't want a service to have a very beautiful website. We want a service that works, that presents values to its users. I will also highlight that this very simple approach that uses journey maps and other approaches like this, they're focusing on the experience of users. They're not just focusing on technological sophistication, even if it is really important to take a look at that. They're not just looking at regulatory improvements that sometimes we have to make. They are looking to something that in certain cases is ignored. That is the experience that users are having in contacting with a website or with contacting with a service. And this is interesting because we are not just doing this because it's a cool option. We are doing this because this contact with users offer opportunities to improvement. So you can use the inputs that users are giving you to define, for instance, what is the improvement queue, what is the plan for improvement for your service. So you are combining something that is very important for any kind of service, that is how it will be implemented and improved, using the material that came from the exploration with users. For the co-creation, that is engaging, in this case, citizens in producing new solutions, new ways of delivering services, I would like to share with you the example that the National Department of Planning from Colombia has. It's a program they call Plain Language, Lenguaje Simple. It's a very simple approach to a very troubling issue that some public administrations have. That is the written communications with citizens. I came from a national context where some people were so afraid when we receive, for instance, a letter from the tax authority that they don't even open the letter and they go directly to the service, creating a huge pressure on the services just because they don't understand the language that is on the written letter. And one of the things that we should engage in seeing associated with the service, it's the way the service is communicated. And if we want to improve the service efficiency, if we want to promote transparency and trust with our citizens, if we want to increase social inclusion, we have to tackle the communication of our services, the language that we are using to present our services, and to enable citizens to communicate with us. And in Colombia, what they have done, it's a 10-step methodology called Simplicity Labs that put together, as you can see in the picture, a public servant and a real citizen, and they work together around the given written communication to detect what are the pain points, what are the sentences that are not really understandable, what should be really cared about in presenting the information in the letter so the receiver can understand what is the goal of the communication. And they work together in very short sessions that can take 1 hour, for instance, to detect and to define a new model of communication. This new model can then be tested, can then be improved, can be combined with similar attempts that are being done. And in the end, they were able already in Colombia to present a very significant number of new communications, written communications that have translated the written letters, the written documents they have into plain and accessible language. This is something that we have done ourselves in Portugal. So we have used this methodology. We have conducted an experimentation to adapt it to our context because all the contexts are different. They need some adaptation. And then we are replicating this methodology for written communications in Portugal. This is important to mention that sometimes innovation is not about having the brightest and most original ideas. It's just about reusing, adapting what is proven useful in other contexts. Sometimes it won't work. Other times, with a slight adaptation, it will prove very useful. And then when we speak about experimentation, if you remember, it's the third step of the sequence I have introduced in the beginning. One of the examples I like to share about experimentation is an example that I know very well from LabX in Portugal. That is the opportunity that we have to transform a real public service into a living lab. That means that we can use our services as platforms, as spaces for their self-improvement. That means we have gathered experts, we have gathered public servants. It is really important to count always with the contributions and with the engagement of public servants of that service. And of course, the citizens that already go to the public services, and they can work together in the real service being delivered to context. They can work together to test and to identify opportunities to develop innovative solutions. And what happened in this context is during 6 weeks, we have the opportunity to combine scientists, public servants, and citizens to test new solutions on the ground, either for the physical services or to the technological solutions that we are developing. So in the public service, we have already the audience that we need to use to test a new service. And it will give us something really important. That is, we are as close as possible almost of the real context where citizens are using our services. So instead of creating a totally artificial context, we are trying to approach on the ground a real context. And this is really, really important, because when we speak about, for instance, technological solutions, they are not in themselves a guarantee of efficiency. Because if people cannot use them, if it is not really understandable that the colors that we use for a given button is the right colors that people intuitively understand as the good colors to use, these very small details are critical for the performance and for the impact that we are attaining with our services. And if we have the opportunity of testing it in a real context, maybe in a real public service, we will, I will say, create much more opportunities for improvement before launching, before implementing any service that we may have. And finally, when we speak about implementation and assessment, we are speaking a very important things. Of course, the experimentation can prove that the solution is not really the solution we should adopt. But even in that case, it will provide a lot of learnings, a lot of lessons that we can use to try different approaches or to use to improve our current solutions. A very interesting example from a slightly different area, much more probably concentrated on the social side. It's the Australian Centre for Social Innovation, TAXI, family by family program. In Australia, they have detected they have severe challenges to their welfare services. And one of the interesting approaches they have in this program is that they bring citizens themselves to support the delivery of services. So families that are seeking for help in the welfare services will have the help for sharing families. That means families that have gone through the same problems and that have prevailed. And they put them in contact so they can share lessons, they can share support. And when they have done this program, they have created a very rigorous, encompassing assessment program. They are being monitored by external entities. So they are engaging very, I will say, robust methodologies to assess the impact of this approach. It can prove a not so interesting solution, but as a matter of fact, it proved very impactful. First, it enables that a single public official called a family coach can work with 15 sharing families, the families that are sharing their, let's call them, success stories. These 15 sharing families can work with 14 seeking families that represent up to 100 children at risk. So they can multiply the impact of limited and scarce human resources. And when they do this kind of exercise, they also discovered that they have a cost-benefit ratio of 1:7. That means that for each euro that they put in this program, they are saving 7 euros in the cost that alternative solutions will have. This was important because this kind of data were critical to scale this solution. So if you want to scale a solution, if you want to continue to improve an existing solution, you have to ensure that you have assessment and evaluation methodologies planned to happen. And to conclude, because I'm taking probably too much time, but Nick is responsible for keeping me online.
You're doing fine, Bruno. You still have 5 minutes in the foreseen time, so no worries. You're doing excellent. You're doing excellent.
I won't take more than 1 minute because I just want to finish presenting some rows of thumb. So just to go back to the initial concepts, and now I hope that you see these concepts in context, because we need not just of inspirational discourses, but we need stories that came from the ground. And citizen-centricity is something that came from the ground, as I hope to have shown in the previous example. So we should adopt this point of view of citizens to define the challenges we have to solve in our public services, to have an integrated approach to channels, because the state is divided in very different organizations, but the citizen is always the same citizen. So if it is a citizen that contacts with very different public services, it is still the same citizen. And we should lower the burden that the organization and channel organization of the state is placing upon our citizens. And we can only do that if we bring citizens' experiences inside the way we are designing and we are developing our services. Then, and I hope Jolene will speak better about this issue of service design. Do not try to guess what is really needed among citizens, and engage users throughout all the stages of a service design process. Ensure that this stakeholder engagement is creating synergies, is, for instance, creating also buy-in. So in the end, you don't have problems of public organizations resisting the adoption of a new services, because if you bring them in the beginning, they will be part of the solution. They are not be implementing a solution, they will be a part and the creator of the solution. This is critical from my previous experience, I can assure you that. Then you can learn a lot with testing methods. I have a person that was quite influential for me that says, if you are doing something innovative and you are not failing, it's because it is not so innovative as you think it is. Because doing innovation is testing in a controlled environment, of course, but is learning from errors, is learning from these attempts. It's about constant improvement. And this constant improvement could only be attained with the people you want to serve. That means the users of that service. So keep always these feedback loops working. And finally, a solution, technological or not, should ensure it is inclusive, trustful, and that it is efficient, of course. And you can only assess that if you get a sense about how users are adopting, are engaging with that solution. So this is really, really important, because it will also, this permanent contact with users will also ensure you that you are not just able to improve the solutions that you have, but will also enable you to try to detect emergent trends and to anticipate changes. So while you are providing, let's say, very nice public service for today, you are at the same time starting to think what will happen in 20 years when the population is older, for instance, where you have some territorial changes that put some population more in a given area than another. You can start to plan for that kind of changes instead of waiting them to blast in your face, if I may say that. So to conclude, I hope to ignite some of your curiosity, and I hope to have I will say, provocative words enough to have some question from your side. And thank you for your attention.
Oh, thank you so much indeed, Bruno, for always being so enthusiastic and inspiring in these kind of meetings. So it's really, really our pleasure to have you with us. I think also in setting forward and setting the scene for this whole morning in terms of, on the one hand, concepts. As you said yourself, I mean, conceptual and methodological, theoretical, even concepts, but also in the same go, concretely illustrating them by cases, by experience from yourself and other government institutions. I think this is really, really an excellent scene setter and kickoff of the morning. But indeed, let's open up the floor to some of the colleagues and friends that are online with us. So colleagues, if you have a question or to Bruno, or if you have something to share yourself, I mean, experience-wise, something that you've done in terms of being it exploration, co-creation, experimentation, or the assessment, happy to hear these things as well from your side. So I think by now we all know how this functions. So if you have something that you would like to bring in, just raise your hand, vertical hand, and then happy to take these. So I see Rexap is here. So you have the floor. If you can just briefly introduce yourself, where you come from, that would be super helpful. Please, Rexap.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Recep Vasoli from Ministry of Finance, Labor and Transfers, Kosovo. I'm head of Department for European Integration and Policy Coordination. So I thanks previous presenter for his presentation. And it creates me a doubt in my head. I don't know if we can maybe discuss and clarify. In Kosovo, we are doing the public consultation for any initiative, for any law, etc. So actually, we are not getting so many comments. When we talk about public services, I don't know if the consultation goes to public service area as well. Otherwise, many times we say that we consult with citizens, with civil society organization, with everybody. And in that context, for me, it's not clear how the simple citizen can understand a draft law, or I don't know, some maybe strategy or concept documents that we are sharing to consult. Or is the maybe the consultation, public consultation of government initiatives, is it maybe not service to citizens? It's maybe more coordination with some key stakeholders, maybe, or I don't know. So in that sense, is this public consultation service to citizens? In that case, how are they going to understand, or how can we be more clear or more simple to them with the laws and strategies? Thank you.
Nick, should I answer now or wait for other questions?
I would take it immediately. I think it's good to take it immediately. Thanks for the question.
Recep, thank you so much. It's a great question, and there is not a lot of people that will bring immediately this question. I think you have brought two very important topics about adopting a citizen-centric methodology or approach. The first one is, how can we activate citizens' participation and interest for these approaches? Because they are important for us, but people around us, they don't have the obligation to see the interest of participating. That's a question. So especially if we don't have previous experience of engaging citizens, if I might share my experience, you will find people that are even suspicious about what you are trying to do, inviting them to provide feedback and to give opinions. My previous experience also dealt with that. So the kind of challenges that you are facing when apparently you are creating an opportunity for people to participate and people do not participate, or people even react negatively when you, for instance, go and invite them to answer a survey or to provide inputs to a given solution. That's one problem. The other problem I think you have brought in this a very important problem is, should people that we are engaging in our exploration and our experimentation be experts to understand the technical details and to have the skills to provide, I will say, qualified technical feedback. I think it's a different approach. What I will say is that for the first part, it's really important that we see these interventions of citizen centricity not as single shots interventions. It is not something we can do just to complete in a project and leave behind. It's something that we should understand as a kind of wave that we will adopt today and we will keep improving in next iterations. It's not something we can do once in a moment and hope that everything is solved. It's something that we should expect to take time, because we need to build a relationship of trust. We need to build a relationship where we can provide people first with guarantees about confidentiality, anonymity of their feedback, for instance. We should, for instance, not wait for people to reach us. In my case, I have discovered that it is much more efficient and impactful if you go there on the ground to the neighbors, to the neighborhoods, to the place where people live, and you create a mobile solution to ask people to provide feedback. So I will say that you need to abolish the distance that sometimes exists between public administration and citizens. And to do that, you have to try to diminish in a progressive way. First, I will call it the trust distance. And for doing that, you should tackle directly concerns that people may have about confidentiality of information, protection of data. Second, you should abolish social and physical distance. That means you should go to the places where the people you want to engage are. You should not open in your public organization a desk to receive feedback. It is not enough. It is probably necessary to go there to the ground and to meet people where they are. They will feel more comfortable and you will be proven that you are really committed in adopting a different solution. And finally, I will call it linguistic distance. It is not enough to adopt traditional communication solutions, I will say. You have to be sometimes very inventive in the way you are communicating. And for instance, in previous experience I have, it proven very powerful where instead of just addressing, I will call it generic citizens, you discussed previously with civil society organizations. You expose to those civil society organizations what are your goals, what are you trying to do, and you engage these civil society organizations as partners in your project. And they can engage with people they know better than you probably, that are the people that came from their areas of intervention. The second question. Well, of course, we cannot expect people to provide technical comments on the code we are using to websites. We should ask things that are relevant for the users. And the things that are relevant for the users is the experience they have with a web page. So for instance, if we are asking them to provide inputs on the code, we'll probably have just comments if we have the luck of having a citizen that is also an engineer. But if we are providing them with a prototype or a mock-up of the website of the service, people will tell you what works and what doesn't work, more than any other expert, because they are interested and they have previous experience in dealing with websites. And besides, they know more than anyone else what works better and what doesn't work at all with them. So it is really important that we also play fair in opening spaces to engage users into relevant issues they have. If we want to have a more technically detailed approach, we have to create specific approaches to have engineers and experts involved. So sometimes we need to have, I will call it, a leveraged approach to the same service. So the same service can put you in contact with different groups of citizens. For instance, disabled citizens will need very specific contexts to involve them and to experiment the solutions with them. You can engage, for instance, entrepreneurs if it is a service that is designed for businesses. And it's a different approach that you have to have. If you want to have experts and you want also to use their experience as citizens, because they are also citizens, you have to create a different approach. So there is no one-size-fits-all approach in engaging citizens. And Recep, I hope to have provided some useful answers to your question.
Thanks so much, Bruno. And I think the point you mentioned about this, well, the 4 different kind of lowering distances. So you have the expert, let's call it cognitive kind of distance to, well, not only seeking expert advice, right? But then also the trust distance, the social physical distance. This is interesting, like moving out. I mean, leaving our offices and going sometimes literally on the street, but like also creating this kind of safe space. And then this linguistic distance. This is crucial. Of course, as Recep said, it's if the topic is about, laws and legal elements, of course, this cognitive expert distance might be a very important one, but not impossible, as we understood from you. Thanks so much. I see also a hand from colleague and friend Goran Pastrovic. So please, Goran, come in.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Nick. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this event. Coming from as a freelance from Equilibrium, I was inspired actually from Mr. Bruno and Recep both, and I partly already got the answer for my question, but I'll just give a brief intro. I pretty much like this holistic approach and all the elements that were presented, and I also like the very down-to-earth question of Mr. Recep because it is a pain point for all, not only the Western Balkans, I guess. It's a global question, especially now when everything is digitalized and to a certain extent this user centricity has been implemented, but sometimes it was not fully implemented simply because of the urgency due to pandemic. So in that sense, I would focus only on this aspect of Colombia case, plain language program. And I was wondering whether Mr. Bruno and his colleagues from the OPSI, and I'm a very big fan of OPSI and their accelerator for innovation, so I know that they're very much pragmatical, have had some systemic approach towards setting this type of approach, being it either this Colombian case or other. My personal experience where I met for the very first time this type of, so to say, way of setting the harmony between the collaborators was agile approach. And it was, I have passed 3 agile courses, and that was the very first moment where I felt that it gives very, so to say, creative, without boundaries communication. The other was CAF, so Common Assessment Framework and Quality Management. So these 2, so to say, systems gave me a possibility to equal the stakeholders, no matter the gender, the roles, and or other things. And I think it's maybe if I would choose, and that's again a question for Mr. Bruno, if I could choose between the elements which to start first in order to make a tailor-made approach. I know that there is, as he said, there is no one fits all, but nonetheless. So would that be the plain language, and does he remembers any of the methodologies or tools that are setting this plain language approach? Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you, Goran. I really think Goran brings something that I should have started to say to Recep, is that the challenges that Recep shared, and then now Goran has shared with us, are not solved anywhere. So we are trying to solve it. We are having better experiences in some places than in others, but it's not that we can assume it's solved by definition. So it's always to search for that kind of attrition with reality. So we should not despair because we don't have a perfect answer to the challenge that we have. What we should commit to have is the attitude and also the skills and tools to approach these challenges. So just to be clear on that. So Goran, well, first of all, thank you so much for your words. I really appreciate what you are saying about OPSI, of course, and the work we are doing. I will say that as goes in the tailor-made in the tailor-made expression, each case may mobilize different building blocks to define a methodological approach. And I know that from this plain language program, that they have gone through successive versions of the rules. And what is interesting is that each new application of the methodology, it's also an opportunity to improve the methodology. So when we have something like a methodology or a service defined in a given moment, we have always an opportunity to gather elements that will enable us to reinvent that very service and methodology. So if we have the service working, if we have our business working right now, we have the opportunity to ensure that this service can create the means to a next version of itself. So we don't need to demolish everything and start from the scratch. We have what we have, and what is important is that we are really, really aware that we can take a look on what we are doing, not be afraid in detecting improvements to be made. In the backstage, let's say in the blueprint of the service, in the way our regulations are working, in the way our organizations are communicating with each other, but also in the way our services are touching citizens. We can gather these elements. We can start by looking at these elements in a way of defining what will be the next step of our service. And this is important because this will guarantee us that when we are faced with crisis, and crisis will happen in the future as well. So we don't have a vaccine against crisis. So they will continue to appear. We will have something that Gordon said that I really want to highlight. If we have these methodologies in place, we will have agile and flexible ways of reacting to the crisis. And instead of repressing and having a reactive approach to crisis, we can have already some elements embedded in our public organizations that will ensure us that we will have an agile way of reacting, that we are already in possession of important skills, that our public servants, for instance, know that it is possible in 2 weeks to organize a test to ensure the passage of something that works in a physical environment to a virtual environment. If we are ensuring this creation of capacity, we will have much more flexible and agile public organization in the future. And I know that what happens in the Lenguaje Claro, it's precisely that approach. That's the means of ensuring that the program has the instruments to ensure its constant improvement and adaptation.
Super.
Hope to be able to answer you.
Thanks so much, Bruno. I really like the interaction, which is sometimes a difficult thing to create on these online platforms, but really pleased to see how it goes. It means that we also have two other hands being raised, and I'm also cautious about time, and the last thing I want to do is to cut the discussion. So I propose that we take these two hands in this round, and then we move to the presentation from Jolien. Other colleagues, please note down your comments, your questions. We will take them in the next speakers, also in the final roundtable. So I see Alina and I see Milos. So ladies first, Alina, you have the floor.
Oh, hello, everyone. So I'm Alina from the High-Tech Minister of Armenia. Actually, was very happy about the topic of the webinar because it's very much in line with what's happening in our ministry. We're working on the service design kit to be offered to the governmental bodies so that they can use it in this decentralized manner. Also, we would consider an expert base to help and guide them when needed. My question is to Bruno, maybe just regarding the chain that you mentioned, exploration, co-creation, experimentation, and implementation. Just do you consider experimentation and implementation, the two last links in the chain, should there maybe be also like a little bit rather managed centrally, for example, by high-tech ministry? What's your just take on that? Thank you.
Super, thanks so much, Alina, and also a pleasure to have you and Armenia. I mean, high-tech ministry in this case. So super. Let me immediately also take Milos, and then maybe we can take them in one go, Bruno, if you allow me.
Yes.
Please, Milos.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks first for inviting me. It's really a pleasure. I wanted to, this is Milos from European Policy Center, think tank in Belgrade, Serbia. I wanted to pick up on one of the last lines from Mr. Bruno's presentations, which went something like this. So if you have an innovation implemented and you don't fail in implementing it, it means that you did not innovate. Now, this is a bit of a mind-altering thought and provoking. And I find it very interesting. So it means essentially that failing is necessary, right? When you innovate, and perhaps this is something that we all need to learn or think about a bit more. I just wanted to hear Mr. Bruno's reflection on how do we, what does he think in terms of saying, for example, that costs of failing are sometimes less important than benefits of failing, right? Is there any example that maybe he can share with us to prove this, that I just that just came out of my mind as I am asking this? So this is it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Alina. Thank you so much, Milos. They are really, really good questions. I will start with Alina's question. Well, as I told you, we can define other sequences of steps to define the service design process. There are probably hundreds of competing models. I don't want to say this model should be an orthodox version everyone should endorse. So please feel free to combine it and to develop a process that is adapted to your own context and challenges. I'm just presenting something that even in a kind of didactic way can put forward some lessons I want to share with you, some experience I want to share with you. I will say that the governance structure should depend on the contextual determinants you are operating. And I will say this because from my previous experience, the fact that when we came as LabX to work with a public organization that was the owner of the public service, or the public organizations that are the owner of the different parts of the same service. In fact, we were solving a problem because we are seen as a third party that don't have a specific interest in putting a service in a direction or in another. So instead of seeing this kind of, to speak plainly, turf wars between organizations that sometimes are competing about who is the owner of a given service, we were operating as a kind of neutral element that, of course, are operating in a project that has an owner, but that have this independence to provide reliable, evidence-based information about how the experimentation and how the assessment of the service is going. So that was an experience that came from a given context, because when you have a service, a complex service, you have multiple channels, you have multiple organizations at the same place. And as important as testing technically the service itself, it is to create a platform of agreement between all the stakeholders that are involved. In our case, it was important to have a free rider like LabX that can connect all these people. For instance, in the beginning of a project, most of our time was researching with users and engaging stakeholders, engaging different public organizations, demolishing silos, attacking myths and fears that some of the organizations will have about losing recipients, for instance. So we were working in creating a common theme. And for doing that, the facilitation role was important to be held by a third-party organization. So I am not sure about your specific context, but in other contexts, it works when we have different players doing that. In other contexts, I can tell you that the project only go to implementation because, quite on the contrary, we have some organization that has power and mandate enough to say, no, we are doing this. okay, we are engaging you. This is very fine. You have your doubts, but users are satisfied and we are doing this. And mandate, legitimacy, and to be frank, power is critical in this moment as well. So it's also a matter of leadership if you want to. So different models can apply to different contexts. And then to Milos, oh yes, I will say that failure, I won't say necessary, but it's inevitable in the sense that sooner or later, your users will change. The needs of your users will change. The skills of your users will change. And the service that you have right now will proven growingly, I will say, disconnected from reality. At least this risk exists permanently. So what you can do is you can control these failures if you adopt experimental approaches. So instead of launching a service and waiting the service to work or better or worse, you can try to ensure that you have a controlled environment where, for instance, the costs are very, very limited. I can assure you, for instance, before launching the portal for employment in the Portuguese public organization, where people can see the jobs opportunities and can manage their unemployment benefits. Before doing that, we have run during 4 weeks, it's a very controlled process in time, a series of tests to see usability and accessibility. It was as simple as that. And we identified 160 opportunities of improvement. And it was so clear that the public organization that is responsible for the service, that in the beginning was resisting because they thought we are saying they are not able to do that. They were really resisting it. But after 4 weeks, they were saying, we will postpone the launching of the portal in order to solve not all of the 160 challenges, but the critical ones. And doing that, just to give you an example, they have improved 70% the number of mobile users. Because before, they don't have a website optimized for mobile devices. Just something as simple as this can improve you a lot your service. So doing this in a controlled environment, in experimental set, will enable you not just to control the risk of spending money, but will give you data to sustain your case. So I don't know if I was able to answer Alina and Milos, but I'm glad to continue the discussion in the roundtable.
Super, thank you once more, Bruno, for, I think, kicking off the morning in such a brilliant way. Also, thanks for the colleagues already to be so active in putting your questions forward. Really, really appreciate it. And as Bruno said, we can take more questions during the final roundtable. And I think it would also be nice if during the webinar you post down some topics you would like to explore further that we cannot do because the simple reason of time for today. Just feed us, send us with topics on which maybe on some of the questions we can organize a webinar on itself. And so happy to play that kind of facilitating role as Sigma in providing a platform for discussion around one topic a whole morning. And so think along with us, feed us with this kind of input, and happy to set it up all together and for you. So many thanks again once more, Bruno, for this. But I think with this, we also come to the next part and to the next speaker. So Jolien, happy to introduce you on stage. Sorry to keep you waiting a bit, but as you can see and hear, it's quite an active audience this morning. So I'm sure that you wouldn't mind. So as introduced already, Jolien is a service designer within the Ministry of Social Security, and she will, I think, highlight and illustrate even more some of the concepts that Bruno already kicked off this morning. So Jolien, all yours, please.
Okay. Thank you a lot, and thanks for the invitation. First of all, I'm going to share my screen.
We can see it. If you can put it into presentation mode. Excellent, like this, Jolien.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, and my name is Jolien, and I work for the Ministry of Social Security as a service designer, which means that I'm constantly looking at ways of improving our service for persons mainly with a disability. And the methodology I use the most often is the methodology of design thinking. So first of all, I like to talk a bit more about what is design thinking. And throughout my explanation, I would like to talk about three projects I worked on the last 3 years. So the first project is the project of the debt process. So it happens that people, when they have an allowance, they can create a debt accumulation, but they can come to our service to ask for a cancellation. But in reality, we see that the letters are really very difficult in understanding, and not many persons did ask for cancellations, which was like weird in our opinion. So with design thinking, we really tried to understand the problem and also to try to find the right solutions. The second project I'm going to talk about is the project of intake remake. So persons with a disability can go to our service and ask for an allowance. They need to fill in an online form, and afterwards they are invited for an appointment with a doctor. But what we mentioned was emotionally very heavy for the people to fill in the form, and there was a lot of stigmatization. So again, with design thinking, we were trying to find solutions. And the third project is a project on no-show. So as I told you, people are invited to visit one of our doctors, and it's also a critical step in the process to get their allowance. But what we watched in reality was that many people didn't show up on the appointment, and didn't let our service know, which was a big problem. Also for the person self, because when they didn't saw a doctor, they didn't have the right for their allowance. So also very strange observation in which we tried to find the right explanation throughout design thinking. So this is what I'm going to take you through in its like half hour. So as Bruno already mentioned, there are a lot of steps you can use to go and use the user-centric approach. And one of the methodologies you can use is a methodology of design thinking that consists out of 5 phases. The empathize and define phase is like what Bruno mentioned, the exploration. Then the ideate phase is a phase where we really go into co-creation and use the collective intelligence. And then the last 2 phases, the phases of the prototype and test, that are the phases in which we're going to experiment and really try to find out which solution is the right to implement. When we're talking about design thinking, we often also see this figure, the figure of the double diamond. And it shows the flow of the methodology. It's like a tendency of diverging and conversing. So first of all, the empathy phase. This is the phase we're going to broaden up. We're going to find as many as possible insights to really understand the needs, the emotions of our end user. And afterwards, we're going to converse again, because we're trying to really formulate a problem statement. And then the second diamond, we're going to converse again. So when we are in the ideate phase, we're going to find as many possible solutions as possible. And then in the last phase, we're going to diverse again, and we're trying to really find the solution for our problem. So that's a bit the tendency of the methodology. So the first phase, the empathize phase. So again, it's in the beginning of the first diamond. We're going to broaden up. And when we're in this phase, it's really important to have the beginner's mindset. So when we start at interacting with our users, we literally don't know anything. Always, I see it with all colleagues, we have a lot of assumptions of why people don't respond on a letter, for example, but all these assumptions aren't necessarily true. So when we start with interacting with our user, we forget all our assumptions and going into these beginners mindsets. The second important thing is from the user's point of view. So we're really looking in through the glasses of our user. We're really trying to understand what they need, what they expect, what they feel. And in order to do that, we need to become a researcher. We, like Bruno said, we need to go into the field and really interact with the user. There are a lot of tools we can use in order to collect all these insights. And one tool, I think, a very familiar tool is just to have an interview, a conversation with our user in which we try to understand in depth their experience when they apply, for example, for an allowance. Another tool is the observation, is that when people try to go online and fill in a form, we just sit next to them and observe what they are doing and how they are going into the process of, for example, finding the website. The third tool is a mystery guest. It's a very funny tool to use. And in this tool, you're going to act as a user yourself, or a colleague can act as a user, and means that yourself, you're going to purchase a product or a service to really experience what the user is experiencing when they are going through the process. And fourth of all, we also can ask our user to keep a diary in which he notices all his thoughts, his feelings, in order for us as researchers to understand their point of view. Maybe here I want to talk about an anecdote. So the first year I started to work for the service, I worked on the project of no show. So in which the project in which the user or the person with the disability didn't show up on the doctor's appointment. And in all my enthusiasm, I immediately dived into the topic. And for me, it was very clear that the end user was the person with a disability, because he was the person who was invited and who didn't show up on the appointment. So I tried to organize interviews and observations, but I will give permission to laugh. I forgot one very important stakeholder group, mainly the doctors. Afterwards, it was obviously that I needed to ask them also to have some interviews and observations, because they were a primary stakeholder. But in my naivety, I didn't saw it. So that's also a tip I wanted to give to you is when you start at a project, and when you start to identify all the stakeholder groups, is to make a stakeholder mapping, and really to take your time to think about all the stakeholders you need to ask to work within the project. Because as Bruno told, it's very important to get them involved in the beginning of a project as a buy-in, to implement the final solution in the end. And in the case of the doctors, in the beginning, it was hard to get their involvement, because I forgot them at the beginning. But it was also important to collect their insights, because for the person with a disability, I held all these observations, and I understand that it wasn't clear why they needed to go to the appointment. They forgot their appointment. But for the doctors themselves, it was very useful that some people didn't go to their appointment, because for them it was a time to really finish the form and to make a decision in the case. So a tip is when you start with the empathize phase, is to map out a stakeholder mapping in order to understand who to involve and who are the mainly users to interact with in the empathize phase. And when we were talking about the empathize phase, often I see colleagues thinking, oh no, I need to collect information, I need to go interact with the user, it's going to cost a lot of time, it cost a lot of money. But here I want to make a distinction between how we look at representativeness. So most often we look at it as a quantitative manner in which we use all those calculations, and we are going to look at socio-demographic factors like the gender or the cities where people are living. But in my opinion, the qualitative manner in looking at representativeness is much more eye-opening, because when we're looking through that glass, we're looking at characteristics that are really important of understanding the problem. It's about characteristics like their behavior, like the context also in which persons lives, their motivations, all those kinds of truths. And especially when we work with political teams, those characteristics are much more interesting to know than whether a person is female or male. Maybe it's a bit flu what I'm all talking about, but I'm going to show it with an example. I know this is in Dutch, but I'm going to translate it for you. So this was the project on the debt processes, in which when people have a debt, they can ask for a calculation. And in the project, we really wanted to try to understand which characteristics assured that people understood or didn't understood our letters, and which characteristics were important to whether people were responding or not to our letters. And as you can see here, these are the list with all the extreme characteristics. And as you can see, it's a spectrum. So people can be in the end of a spectrum or in the middle. It all depends on the people we're interacting with. And for this case, we looked at the characteristics like when people enjoyed education or not, what was their mother language, also the kind of their disability, was it mental or physical, their digital skills. Also, we looked at whether people lived in poverty or not, whether people had already debts or not, and their knowledge about all the process. So for us, these were the characteristics that were really fascinating to look at in order to understand how people interact with our service. And we tried to find people who were on those extremes, because I believe when we find people who are a bit extreme and we try to understand their experience, we're going to get a lot of information, and with those information we can find solutions that will work for all the population. So it's a different kind of looking at representativeness, but it is a really interesting one of really also understanding the experience of our end user. I give you some insights of the interviews I did with the persons who had a debt. So first of all, we used a lot of jargon, so people didn't really understand our letters. We gave some options, but they weren't clear in the letters we sent. Also, we found out that the letters came off as hostile and harsh. And for me, the two most important insights are the two letter. So first of all, when people receive a letter in which we mention that they have a debt and they can ask for a cancellation, they want to know why. And that was information we didn't provide at first, because we didn't thought it was that important for them. We thought it was just important that they knew the options. But throughout the interviews, it seemed that was really the key information for our user. And the last insight was that we work with people with a disability, and often they live in poverty. often they have not only at our services debt, but also at other services. And what we saw that when we sent our letters requested, they didn't open the letter because they thought it was another debt. But in fact, we wanted to help them and to give an option to ask for a cancellation for a debt. But because it was a registered letter, they didn't open it. So it was a really important insight for our service. Okay, the second phase, the phase of define. So when we look at the double diamond, now we're going to go to just one problem statement. And when we're doing this, again, we do this from the user's point of view. We've done all these interviews, observations, so we use those information in defining the problem. Yeah, we use a focus in a way that we focus on the issue of our user and not the issue of the system. And yeah, as I will explain you in other examples, it's also a mistake that I see that is often made, and also for me it's a mistake that is easily made because you work within a system, and it's yeah, very easy that you think from out the perspective of the system and not from out the perspective of the end user. And when we make a problem statement, try to form it in a way that it is challenging and inviting, and that is it opens up for us to think about possible solutions. And when we're trying to put the user's point of view in front, one tool that can be very helpful is the point of view template, in which we identify our user, their needs and their insight. So for example, here in this webinar, as a participant of the webinar, so that's the part of the user, I need like new insights about user-centric design. So that's the need. And then the insight is because I want to develop an innovative service. So that's how the template works. It's very easy, and it's really empathize the focus on the user and their needs. Some tools you can use when you're in this phase. The first tool you can use is the persona. This is a persona I made for the project Intake Remake, in which we're trying to remake the form when people make the demands for an allowance. In this project, we did like, I think, 32 interviews and 16 observations. And when we were in the define phase, we really tried to map out all the information, to find patterns, to find main themes. And we did create 6 personas to take further in all the development story. And this persona, it helps us to really visualize the person, their needs, their emotions. And often, yeah, we talk about the user, but it's not very tangible. It's a bit flu. But when we work with a persona and we give them a name, we give them a photo, it's much more visible, and it's much more easy to empathize throughout the whole process with our end user. And for this persona, you can here see again some extreme characteristics I used, like whether it's a person as he or she digital skills, did he or she enjoyed education, yeah, and other characteristics. And also what I always do when I'm working with personas is that I add quotes that I heard within the interviews, because it's much more easier to feel with them when we use quotes. And for example, so this is the story of Sophia, who is 8 years old and has a disability on her right hand. And yeah, Sophia is very digital skilled, so she did the application online. And for her, it was very easy to go online and to search via Google and to find information about our service. But for her, when she was filling in the form, it was very difficult for her because there wasn't space for nuance. And as she told us, for her, it wasn't that she wasn't able to do anything. It was just that she has periods in which she was very weak and tired, and she wasn't able to work or to take care of her children. But in other periods, she was just fine, and so she could go to work. This it was very difficult to fill in the form. And then the second tool we can use within the define phase is the customer journey, or the journey map, as Bruno called it. And in this, we're really going to map out all the journey of the customer. And it's important to really empathize the pains and the gains. So as I will explain, there are a lot of positive and negative emotions when, in this case, the person with disability applied for an allowance. And when we notice that there are negative emotions, we can see that there are the pains of our service. But at the same time, it are opportunities to make our service better and to make improvements. And when we see there are like positive emotions, we know we're doing something good, and we're going to try to expand it throughout the whole service. And with this map, it's really easy to get those insights. So for example, the journey of Sofia, it starts with the realization that she has difficulties in following the norms of the society. So she has problems with taking care of her children, with working every day. And because those difficulties, she's like a bit ashamed. But she decided to go online and to search some information about disability. And she finds a lot of information, and also the information is not also consistent. So she gets a bit frustrating, because she don't really know what to do. But then she comes, at least she's on her website, and for her there it's clear where she need to click to fill in the form. So at one side she's happy because she can be independent in her application, but in the other side she needs her passport, her PIN. It's a lot of difficulties to really get there. So there again she's a bit like angry. And then she's filling in her form. She's afterwards, so she applied for it. She's going to search for some extra information about how our processes work, and there she's really at ease because she finds the information she needs on her website. But then again, she received a letter. The letter isn't clear. She don't really know what to do. So it's really a lot for her, and she's really at the point of just giving up. But then at least she gets the invitation to go to one of our doctors, and she received a decision. So as you can see, throughout just a simple journey of filling in a form, there are a lot of emotions, a lot of pains, some gains. But when you visualize it this way, it's really helpful to see also where are the quick wins and how we can optimize our service. Then the third phase is a phase of ideate. So here we are in the second diamond, and we came from a very clear problem statement. And now again, we're going to broaden up, and we're trying to find just as many solutions as possible. And in order to do that, we need a structure in which we can embrace creativity. And the structure is also important because we want to create like a safe space in which all the co-creators can share their ideas. And And yeah, as Bruno mentioned, co-creation is also a very important step into the whole design thinking process, and because there is a lot of collective intelligence. And I also believe when you're going to start to think about solutions, it's really important to bring persons with different perspectives together to first look again at your stakeholder mapping and to see which where are the different perspectives and bring those people together. Also again as a buy-in. And when we bring together all those different perspectives, the solution will be in one sense like profounder, because with all those different point of views we combine. And the third aspect of importance is to have a focus again on the problem statement and on the user experience. And here the personas will help you to keep in mind for who we are designing solutions. When we talk about ideations, there are a lot of tools we can use. The tools are really endless. So that's why I just suggest you to go online and to search for tools you can use. I see here, and I'm talking about the phase of ideation, a lot of colleagues are fear of letting go the more traditional way of bringing people together to organize discussions, but discussion in which people are mainly trying to sell their idea instead of listening to what other people have to say. And when we use like new techniques, we will create other dynamics. And also, I mentioned it because I do this a lot, that there is a lot of positively energy, because we're all working together like a collective group. And yeah, maybe I will just mention some tools so you can search them up. You can use like the dark side, the lighting demo, Lego Serious Play, Crazy Eights, or funky names. And also, I really would like to encourage you to just use some Lego bricks to build your idea, or to get your pencils and draw what's in your mind, to use Post-its, just to go crazy as possible, because in all ideas there is something useless we can build further on in the next phase. So the next phase is a phase of prototype. And again, when we see the double diamond, it's in the last phase, in which we're going to try to find just one solution that works. What's important in this phase, before I told you to forget about all your assumptions, to work from out a beginner's perspective. But when we were in the prototype phase, we gained all those informations based on reality. And now we're going to formulate assumptions on whether which solution is going to work or not. And these assumptions we're going to test. And that means that we're going to make prototypes as simple and cheap as possible. Now, I'm telling here out of experience, it's very, very frustrating, because you take all this time in making like a new form or a drawing, and mainly just to throw away. But that's really the manner in finding out what is working and what is not. So it's really about learning fast. Also, the experimenting that was Bruno talking about, it's really in this phase, is that we're trying to fail. I added some examples because I really wanted to show to you that you didn't need to know how to draw. It's a drawing that I made in the project of Intake Remake. So I just made a little drawing of our website and a button which people can click on to make a demand. This is really what it is in the prototype phase. You draw something very quickly, you would show it to your colleagues or to your stakeholders, to your user group, and you try to find out is it working or not? And when you have like those insights, you can start in designing a more attractive visual of your prototype. One example, again, a very easy, quick drawing. We look if it works or not, and then we make a more attractive visual to take with us in the final phase, the phase of testing. Yeah, in the phase of testing, it's about collecting feedback of the end user. You can do it in a qualitative or quantitative manner. And again, here we want to make as many errors as possible, because when we discover our fault, we are in the possibility to make our services even better. So tools we can use. The first tool we can use here is the user test. So when we, for example, develop a new form, we go to the users at their houses and we show the new form and we ask them to, for example, make a demand for an allowance. And we just sit next to them and observe them. We ask them to think out loud. So we're also possible to gain some information about their thoughts, their feelings. And with those information, we can make sure if our solution is working or not, and if you're changing those negative emotions into positive emotions. Another manner, more quantitative method, is a control trials based test. So in which we work with the test and a control group. So if you see in the little figure, the first group, they receive, for example, a new letter, and the old group don't receive a new letter. And then we're going to compare those two groups in order to make some sayings about if the new solution is working or not. We can also use an A/B testing. In this manner of testing, we're giving one person two different forms and we ask them which form is the more preferable one. Again, an example. So this is of the project of Intake Remake, in which we came to the conclusion that when we invite people to go to the doctor's appointment, that they didn't really had the understanding of why they needed to come. So we decided to make a timetable in which we explain all the different steps. But here again, also why testing is important. So first of all, I designed this timetable. Yeah, not true. I first designed this timetable in the prototype phase, but that isn't very attractive. So for the final test phase, we make it a bit more visual. But the fault I made here was I was thinking again out of the system point of view and not the user, because when we look at our system, we have like those 5 big steps, but those 5 big steps aren't visible for our end user. And by testing, we came to that conclusion, and the final timetable looks like this, in which we talk about 3 steps. So I really want here to empathize the importance of testing and making mistakes. I am here just to show you a result. So this is again the result of the project of no-show. With the old letter we sent, there was an absence of almost 14%. And with we created a new letter, and with that new letter, it was like only 6%. And when we had added the brochure, so the timetable I showed you before, it was lower even. And then we also tested with an SMS, a message because we saw that many people just forgot their appointment, and then we saw that almost everybody was present on their appointment. So it's really to show you that when you use this methodology and you interact with your user, you can really gain some positive results. That was in very brief all the steps of design thinking with some examples. I hope to and joined the presentation. I hope it was clear. It had been a while. I needed to talk English, so I hope it was understandable for everybody. And if you have some questions, please ask me.
Thank you so much, Jolien. First on the English, no worries at all. So no need to apologies for that, on the contrary. Second, on the content, that was even more brilliant. So I see here in the chat already a couple of comments and positive compliments, and also some questions. So let me maybe start with the question. I just read it here from Goran. So the question is the following, Jolien: to what extent that the human-centric design is used to increase efficiency, effectiveness in public services? Or do you think that like the current focus is also, or even more, to create kind of, well, bottom line resilience systems in public administration? So how would you see this the whole way of doing this, bringing in this philosophy in public administrations, or at least in yours? To what extent has this been, well, triggered some efficiency, effectiveness for sure, but has it also increased the resilience of the organization as such?
So yeah, for sure, we are better at doing what we are doing because of the design thinking. Because yeah, for me, our users, they have a lot of experience and great experience, and for us as social security, we really need to get those insights in our service. Those yeah, it's really a lot of knowledge that we ignored for a very long time. And yeah, when we are using them, it's really broaden up our perspectives, and we're now in the possibility to find the right solutions. Yeah, I work with cases, so I try to show the colleagues with positive results the effect of design thinking, in order also to try to get it really in the philosophy, in the culture of our service. And I see there is resilience, of course, otherwise it would be too simple. But what I do is I start also with the issues that are important for our colleagues. So when I start with a new project, I just list some problems that we're facing, and I make, for example, a poll, and I let the colleagues vote on the issues, in order also to have a buy-in of them and to reduce the resilience.
Thanks. Just well, to be clear on your function, because you're like a service designer, I mean, that's your title and your function title. Within the ministry, are you the only one, or are you having like a little team of colleagues doing similar kind of work, or what's the...
No, it's just me and one colleague. So we are two service designers, and I really dream of having a team, but yeah, that's not the case, unfortunately. But what we do is we try just to get colleagues enthusiasts about the topic, so they work voluntarily on the project. It's really a different way of working, but also a fun way, because everybody is very motivated. And it's also because we not only use the insights of the end user, the customer, the person with disability, but I also try always to take into account the perspective of our colleagues about their problems, and to take that also into account when I'm developing new projects. And in that way, it's really a nice synergy between the two. And it's a nice way of working.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, interesting to hear when you said, I would love to see our little team growing. I think many colleagues online here, I think they would already love to have a profile like yours within their organization, or even within their public administrations in general. So I think it's great to be ambitious, but just to know that I think in many of our, well, countries that we have online here, that this kind of work, this is really picking up and starting. Yeah. I see the hand of colleague Johanni Lemmik. So please, Johanni, come in.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, and thank you, Jolien, for an excellent presentation. It was really lovely to see and hear how well you have progressed. I just wanted to go back to a seminar or workshop that we had in Bosnia and Herzegovina a couple of weeks ago about digital transformation, but also a lot we talked about how to empathize with your client or user, and also how to bring some tools that you also covered related to design thinking into everyday practice. And my impression was that one of the big obstacles seems to be that it's difficult to see how to start. And I guess you gave a couple of hints where to start from or how to start, but maybe one specific aspect of that would relate to how does your senior management has to sort of see the entire function, if you like, or the entire sort of philosophy, as you said also. So how do you kind of manage that relationship with your senior management? Do they need to get involved in some specific way, or do they just let you do the work? Or what kind of support you need from them and expect from them? So these are the kind of the practical questions I would be really interested in getting your views on. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Johanni, for the question. So I am in the great see that my management is really supportive of the work I'm doing. It was André Goebbels, the former director, who hired me and just told me, Jolien, I want to get behavioral insights in our service. The way in which you do it, it's up to you. So I really had a lot of support in the work I've been doing. But now I see also a turning point because the director is gone, and now I really need to make hard the work I do and the importance of it. And one tool that's very useful is the persona, because there you really visualize the person for we were working, and often for the senior management it's not that tangible because they're not really interacting with the end users, and through the persona they can feel with also the end users and see really the importance of digging into a certain issue. So that's a tip I really would give away is to use the persona. And also what you can do is you can make like little videos of end users in which they explain the problem, and to show it to the senior management to again make it more visual and tangible.
Great, thanks again so much, Jolien. I don't see any hands raised for the moment. So I think with this, many thanks again. Just linking also with what Bruno said in the morning. I think it's great to see when you presented and just lifted like a little tip on all these instruments and tools in the toolbox, Jolien, well, interviews, observations, mystery shopping. These are all things that I think by now colleagues are quite familiar with. But then you also listed and mentioned so many others. I mean, the personas you stressed again now, which might be more a novelty, the customer journeys, and many others. Also there, the colleagues, I mean, in Bruno's team in the OPSI, they have brought all of these aspects, all of them together in this navigator. So there is already, I mean, plenty of material available online. So feel free to dive in or to contact us. Also happy to guide you further. So with this, many thanks again, Jolien, for really the super insightful presentation and story. And I'm sure that there will be many other questions that will come also after this. With this, I think it's high time to move to the next topic, and also speaker, of course, related topic, but moving into the area of digital and also web services in and in Montenegro and with Marina Banovic. So as I said in the introduction, the colleagues in Montenegro and by Marina in person, they are currently working in using this design approach in designing their new web services as we speak. So Marina, with this, I would kindly invite you on stage, virtual stage, to also shed some light on the work that you are currently doing.
Thank you, Nick, very much. Good morning or good day to everybody also from my side. Thank you, Goran, and other colleagues from Sigma and OECD for organizing the webinar with such an important topic. Yes, I'm planning today to speak about, let's say, our first experience in this administration in which we applied design thinking or design approach in creating. It's not exactly the service, it's the strategic document that we produced last year. It is a strategy on digital transformation, and I will explain how did we, let's say, take in consideration and how we were led by this approach throughout the process of, let's say, producing this document. Nick, may I ask you to share the presentation with our audience? Thank you. Yes, basically, the way of work corresponds really a lot to what Bruno and Jolene have said so far. So the concept was more or less the same. I will explain throughout the phases like empathize, define, ideate, prototyping, testing, and finally the launch. How did we implement step by step this approach? So if you go to the next slide, where we are talking about the needs definitions, basically we were approaching the needs of 3 different target groups when this document is in question, and that's general public, stakeholders, and government means ministry. I will tell you a couple of sentences about the context in which we worked and which actually also directed the approach of producing this document. Basically, after long period of government in December last year, there was a change of government. New government is in place for now about 1 year and a half, something less than that. However, when we took over the position, ministry didn't have a roadmap how we should approach the digital transformation. So from our perspective, we needed a guideline or a systemic approach to the digital transformation that the ministry actually is in charge of. When I came into the ministry in February last year, it was immediately clear that there is a lot of interest of all stakeholders about this topic. Primarily business associations or business community in Montenegro was really very much interested to be involved and to contribute to the process. And they were really willing, to know how the things will be planned, how they will be performed. And we felt that there is a big positive energy within the society that could help us to make really a good document, and we then planned to use it. Regarding the general public, the statistics are saying that after long-lasting political, let's say, party in power in a country, those that are coming later, the governments that are coming later do not last long. And I would say that already after a year and a half, we can confirm that, because the next government will be appointed probably this or next week. One of the main topics for us was to make a document that will last in time, so that change of government doesn't mean new strategy, new way of approaching the problem. And by let's say implementing this approach, we wanted to ensure the ownership of the document with the main stakeholders, and also to ensure that they will be the one to pass through the time the idea and the content, and they feel that it is basically their product. This actually reminded me on a radio program on the Radio Free Europe, which is a regional program for Balkans, and a colleague from Bosnia was saying that basically, in a humorous way, like every government that comes, first thing they do, they produce the strategy. Second thing is they start producing action plan. And by the time the action plan is ready, the government is gone and the new one is in place. So they start with the same thing, and things are not moving very fast. Basically, for us, the situation was a little bit different. We didn't have that kind of a document in place, so we needed to create something relatively quickly. We did this in a half a year, but I think the process we conducted was really exemplary, at least for our environment, and it became then later on a role model for other documents to be produced. We can move to the next stage, and basically we started the whole process with the initial consultation, and I will call that as a define phase. Basically, when we opened the initial consultation in front of about 50 interested parties from business sector, civil sector, universities, international community, we presented a digital maturity study that is basically state of art for digital transformation in Montenegro. It just gave us information where we are, and we presented the timeline, and we opened the process for to receive inputs from all the stakeholders already at that time. And I have to say that it was very fruitful and very committed actors from the society who were giving us valuable feedback on what are their needs and what they would like to see in the document to be represented. At this stage, if you can go to the next slide, Nick, I would talk a little bit about inclusion, which actually corresponds a lot with what Bruno and Yolene talked about, and I'm let's say relatively proud on this point. And co-creation, it was very important to explain exactly how this process will be governed and how it will be operationally done. By the law, we had to form e-governance council, and we did, but that council had a limited number of members, so we wanted that a full insight into the production of the document have a wider community. So we created a consultative body that consisted of, again, representatives of business, universities, NGOs, and international community. The function of this body was double. One was to steer and supervise the process in a way, and the second one was it was a source of experts for different phases of development in which we would need a help. In the next slide, I presented the operational level of organization, where we had an operational team. me personally, I'm not very fond of big working groups. They are, in my opinion, often not very efficient. So we tried to keep the operational team slim, but still to have represented inside everybody who can contribute and give a different perspective. I think for the creation of such documents, diversity of perspectives is essential also. So representative of government, tech sector, banking, telcos, university, and civil sectors were presented there, and we had the guiding force in a way, Slovenian expert who was offering international practices. We were looking primarily in Slovenian, like a short run model, and then in Estonian model as a middle term model. At a certain point when operational objectives were produced, the operational team was not enough. We needed to divide work in 7 mini teams. And at that point, from this coordination body, we took something like 30 experts who took part into the mini teams and were working on a specific topic like digital skills or infrastructure or cybersecurity. So I would say that we succeeded not only to open the process, but to involve different stakeholders, to commit them. They committed, and they were really enthusiastic about creating together with the government this document. I have as an example to that, since this also the part of the production coincided with the holiday season. They were, connecting from the holidays and taking part into the some of the workshops that were organized at the time they could not be physically present. So after a while, in July 2021, we had the first draft to present to the wider public again. We did that, and that showed that we are more or less at the same on the right way, but still there were some inputs from the public that we needed to integrate into the document. In October, we produced then a second draft, which I would say corresponds with the phase of prototyping. And finally, each consultation process, when we open the drafts to the public, represents actually a testing phase. After the second round of consultations, actually third one, the document we would say was completed, and it was ready to be launched, to be presented to the government and adopted later on. I think this way of working was very much appreciated by the community, and I think kind of achievements that we or at the same time also lessons learned is that opening the process as soon as possible is quite important, and people appreciate that. That way you can involve them as a partners, stakeholders, and when you are choosing partners and stakeholders, choose those who are concerned and also who care, who are really passionate about working on the project. Of course, good leadership is something that you cannot avoid if you want to succeed. That's also one of the very important points. But I think by this, you really create trust and ownership of the whole, not only process, but also the document among those who are meant to implement it. Because this is a strategy not only for government, it's not e-government strategy, it is a digital transformation strategy. So it tackles all the actors in the society. And I'd say that what we definitely succeed by the fact that around 100 people was involved in one or the other phase, and 30 of them were involved really into the drafting the text itself. We can say that at least, I don't know, 100 people in Montenegro or 150 read the document and they know what it is about, which is not always the case with the strategic documents which are a bit abstract, if you want. As I mentioned at the beginning, I can say that basically what we felt is that if this methodology can work on such an abstract process like drafting of the methodology is, then let's implement use it also for production of concrete services, which is much more operational job. I have to say we were not kind of, every day thinking whether we are really following the methodology or not, but it was somewhere in back of our heads, and we knew that intuitively, in a way, we knew that we need to pass all these steps, and my advice would be to really adopt the methodology and to kind of start from that perspective when you start developing the things, not because sometimes there is a risk that you become a slave of methodology, except instead that you are using it as a tool for reaching a certain goal. So basically, shortly, this is what we wanted to present in the process of using the methodology in Montenegro. Thank you for your attention, and if there are questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much indeed, Marina, for your intervention and highlighting some key lessons indeed. As you said, I mean, interesting to see that the principles of design thinking, as we have seen them before, can also be applied, as you demonstrated, on this not typical service delivery, but also on the production of a strategy in this case. And I think this brings us back also to Rexip's question from early in the webinar on consultation on legal aspects or on draft laws, so that these principles are applicable. And interesting to see, I mean, for me, was also let's say the governance structure that you organized around this, with the consultative boards, operational teams. So also creating the constellation to allow these principles to function and to really deliver then the strategy at the end. So really nice to see this. Really,
if I can reflect to what you've said just about the public consultations, I also hear that quite often here in Montenegro that since it's legally obligatory, it's always there, but it's not very productive. But I would say that most of the times those public consultations are low-profile actions. So it's somewhere on the site of government, published, and people are just not aware of it. I think our main one of the goals that we have as a state administration is to come out and toward the citizen, toward a consumer, if you want, and to present what we do, what we have to say, what we want to achieve, and to ask for their perspective. So I think much more agility is needed from the governmental part in order to achieve this. And from this experience, we can say that if you do so, if you come out and ask for opinion, really, that you get not only opinion, but a great commitment from those who care that the product is good on the end.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for this additional comments and feedback on that point, Marina, definitely. Can I, with this, maybe immediately jump to Milos for the final presentation, then see if we can have some time for discussion afterwards, because I'm quite sure, Milos, that with your research and your work in the region from the side of CEP, but also Weber, that it could be nice to see how all of this, well, inspirational presentations from this morning, how these relate to your findings in your work vis-a-vis citizens, but also wider civil society. So Milos is a senior researcher in the European Policy Center in Belgrade, but also the program manager for the Weber 2 or 2.0 program, which I think all of us are familiar with. So Milos, I would say over to you. And if we have questions also for Marina later on, we can take them at the end, I would propose. Please, Milos.
Thank you, Nick. I just want to mention there is a question for, if in case you want to pick it up right now, or I can continue. So
I would say kick it off already, Milos. I hadn't, it's in the chat, right? I see it now. Let me go through it and you take it away, Milos. And if we have time, we go back into this question later on. Sorry, I hadn't.
Okay.
So please, Milos.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So I will share the screen for in a second. Hope you all see it. So hello, and thank you for inviting me once again. It's a really a pleasure to talk with all of you on the user centricity of service delivery in our region. So just shortly, we are Weber 2.0. We are the project. We are civil society organizations in the Western Balkans that are dealing with public administration reform monitoring for years now, and we are looking at all the power areas that are defined in the Sigma principles, and of course we apply a mixed method approach to monitor what we think is important from the perspective of the citizens and civil society in the first place. And one of the things, so this presentation will be slightly different in a sense that it will not focus directly on the human-centered design, but what I'm going to talk about should serve as an input in this topic, which is really important. One of the added values of our monitoring that is done in the whole region is that we try to explore perceptions of the public and the key stakeholders in the public administration reform and service delivery, specifically for this presentation, because we feel that voices need to be heard, and perceptions alone, of course, do not paint the objective picture when it comes to state of affairs in the service delivery, the obstacles, the advantages. However, we did talk a lot during the morning about human-centered design and the need to empathize with the people's needs, preferences, fears, etc. So this work of ours can actually serve to as an input for defining with whom and how we need to talk more on specific issues when it comes to service delivery. So, as I said, in the service delivery, we use essentially 4 indicators to do our monitoring, and 2 are fully relying on perceptions. One on the civil society perception of civil society actors, and another one is about the perception of the public. And I want to share with you a couple of slides, a couple of figures on how this perception looks like, with just little notes that we are doing this approximately every 2 years. So in the case of the representative survey, such as public opinion, we can make comparisons over time and time series. When it comes to non-probability surveys, such as civil society one, we cannot speak about the over time comparison maybe, but we can have at least comparative descriptions between different cycles. So this will be mostly about the results from 2020, as we are currently implementing the service for this year, for this cycle of weather monitoring. But nevertheless, we will have fresh results soon, and we can share with you as soon as they arrive. But for this particular purpose, let's take a look at the 2020 results, and firstly about the civil society perception on the accessibility of services. So we targeted here civil society as a key stakeholder because a lot of organizations in the region are actually involved in the work on accessibility issues and people with disabilities and marginalized and vulnerable groups. And this topic is on accessibility is essentially divided in three parts: on the territorial or geographical, if you will, accessibility, then adaptation of services to vulnerable groups, and availability or accessibility of different channels of choice for accessing services. Here you can see on the left a couple of information about the service sample and technical side, and the overall conclusion from our survey is that we did already 2 times, and as I said, the 3rd installment is currently being implemented, is that the civil society have quite negative perceptions when it comes to accessibility of services, whether traditional, in-person, or electronic services in the region. Of course, there are country-to-country differences that are worth mentioning, as always. So let's take a look and start with the territorial distribution and its adequacy. You can see on these charts, the first row will always be about the Western Balkan average, and in particular on this slide, the 2 left figures are highlighted, and they show the disagreement. So basically, you can see that on average in the Western Balkan civil society actors, majority of these actors disagree that there is adequate territorial distribution of services, in the sense that all can have an easy access. There are, of course, country variations, with the most negative views being expressed, for example, in North Macedonia. Nevertheless, looking at the whole region and individual countries, it is mostly the majority of respondents who expressed concerns about the adequacy of territorial distribution. This aligns well with the next topic that I wanted to show you, and it's about the distribution of the one-stop shops. So one-stop shops for service delivery are increasing in numbers in the region in the recent years. However, we can see once again that on average in our region there is a majority perception that these are not adequately distributed, and perhaps this correlates or not correlates, but is connected nicely to the fact that not so often in practice in countries of our region there are clear standards for establishing one-stop shops. So where, to whom, what services, what staff should be, and how many staff should be employed in these offices, etc. When it comes to country variations, we can see that the disagreement peaks in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The least disagreement is in Albania, for example, which is perhaps not surprising given that Albania was among the first countries in the region to implement one-stop shops. However, as I said in the previous slide, on average, territorial distribution is not perceived as satisfactory in both cycles that we did so far. Now, switching to another topic, when it comes to accessibility, this is adaptation of services to the needs of vulnerable groups. Here we used a wide definition, vulnerable groups, that can also include all the marginalized population and the people with disabilities, to try to be all-encompassive as much as possible and not to confuse the respondents. Here again, the highlight is on the disagreement, because it makes up more than half of respondents on average in the region. And if you look for each country individually, you will see that in each case, there is over 50%, sometimes even more than 2/3 of respondents who express that vulnerable groups are not approached in the proper way. Going forward to the second question on the adaptability of services to vulnerable groups, you can also see that on average, majority of CSOs or CSO representatives believe that the staff who is employed or in the job positions for service provision is insufficiently trained. for communication or treating people that belong to these groups. So on average, in our region, this is over 60%, with slight country differences and variations. However, negative perceptions prevail. There is a slight difference when it comes to CSO perception on the accessibility of channels of choice, meaning if people have different choices to access services. And here I highlighted figures on the right in the yellow and light green that show that agreement, although not predominant, is somewhat more than on the previous aspects of accessibility. And simultaneously, you can see that this agreement is quite lower than in previous questions that I showed to you. So on average, we have more than a quarter of CSO respondents who agree that there are different channels of choice. But it's perhaps here for this question important to note that the neutral stance is quite exposed as well, constituting around a third of respondents in the whole region, which can also say that not all Serbian civil society actors are informed or know about different access options that are offered by our administrations. However, despite this slightly positive attitude, when we asked if electronic channels are easily accessible for vulnerable groups, we go back to this perception that is constant when it comes to civil society in all countries, and this is predominantly -1, and here again more than 60% in the whole region. So this is when it comes to civil society. We did not see basically any change between the two survey cycles that we had for 2017, 2018, and 19-20. We will see if this third cycle brings in any new development in this regard, but we can say overall that in service delivery part and in all the other parts, to be quite frank, when all the other areas of public administration reform, civil society have critical or worrying or negative perception, which definitely means that we need to communicate more and to cooperate more on the matters that are important for us when it comes to civil society work. Now, public opinion survey, which is representative of the whole populations in our region, paints quite a different picture. Here you can see some technical details about the survey, with one note that is perhaps important to highlight, because we had huge increase in positive reactions from the general public in the survey that we implemented in 2020, is that it was administered after immediately after the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, when our administrations were generally, let's say, forced, or there was a necessity to switch to contactless, distant electronic communication with public administrations, which also meant increase in the number of e-services that are offered in the region. So let's start by looking at a couple of results or views and opinions of the public. When asked whether people see efforts by the governments to simplify administrative procedures and services, on average in our region, people tend to agree with this statement, and this agreement is a majority agreement, and it goes as high as 70% in individual countries such as Kosovo, or 65% in Albania. But in general, people perceive that there are developments, that there are governments investing in simplification procedures and cutting the red tape. This also means that some other aspects of communication with administration are also perceived as positive. For example, when asked whether dealing with administration has become easier in the past 2 years, we also have the similar results. So on average in the region and individually in our countries, we have majority positive responses. This is not only with this question, whether dealing with administration has become easier, but also whether people need less time to finish the business with the administration. The only country where there is a somewhat less positive perception in the region is Bosnia and Herzegovina, whereas other countries are more or less, or were more or less, at the Western Balkan average. Going forward, about electronic services, one interesting result we found in 2020 is that people expressed the view that they are preferring to access services of the administration electronically. So you can see on this slide, except for B&H agreement, there is a preference of electronic services over traditional way of service delivery at the counters or at the offices of the institutions. However, if we switch briefly to the usage of services, it's a bit different picture. So on average, responses never, rarely, sometimes in the Western Balkans are divided in thirds, roughly. You can see that from the first row, meaning that more than half of the population in the region said that they have never or rarely used electronic services. Of course, when we go to at the level of individual countries, in this slide, I've divided them in the 2 parts of 3. And you can see that in Serbia, in Montenegro, and in North Macedonia, share of responses sometimes and often, when we're speaking about the usage of these services, is much higher comparing to experience of people in Kosovo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Albania. And of course, out of those who said that they have used sometimes or often in the 2 years past electronic services, they also find it relatively easy to use. Finally, I wanted to share with you a couple of results about the participation of people in the improvement of administrative services. We talked today about how we must not assume what people prefer and what people need, but we need to ask them, and we need to empathize. So we asked a simple question, whether they were asked to give proposals on how to improve administrative services, and we see that on average in our region, less than half of population expressed that they had been asked to provide such proposal, more precisely 48%. However, this constituted an increase of 17 percentage points compared to the survey that we did in 2017. Perhaps what is important to highlight here that citizens in Kosovo feel the most involved, and a similar situation is in Montenegro or Serbia, with B&H in Albania being at the bottom of this line when it comes to citizen perception on the involvement in the improvement of services. And finally, I wanted to share with you another slide that is supposed to tell us whether people have opportunity to send feedback on the quality. On average in the region, there is a majority agreement. So based on the experience, there are opportunities, and individual country variations and differences are more or less similar to what we've seen in the previous slides. For example, Kosovo and Montenegro and Serbia being at the top, and B&H and Albania at the bottom of this regional scale. And finally, when we calculate all these survey results according to our methodology and express it on a 0 to 5 point scale for an indicator of public perception of state administration's citizen orientation, you can see that we have quite a high assessments for almost all countries, and that comparing to the first cycle done in the for the period 17-18, we have a clear and visible improvement. And this does not come as much surprise, I would say, since also other international organizations or the assessors have also noted that there has been improvement, and statement monitoring reports also confirm that. So our research, our independent research, is also in line with that. Of course, as I said at the beginning, surveys alone are not enough to inform or to objectively say what is going on with the service delivery and what directions we should take. However, we consider that there is not enough perception surveys in other countries that are done systemically and systematically, and that once in a while provide picture about how people feel in general about the service provision in our countries. So there are other elements beside perceptions that are important to make service delivery and service design more specifically oriented towards people, towards users, to be more human-centered, such as increasing physical accessibility and eliminating online accessibility errors for electronic service delivery, systematically applying once-only principle, or systematically using quality management tools, whatever tools administrations prefer, to systematically and continuously measure user satisfaction and collect feedback, to monitor service delivery and publish performance data online so it is visible to everyone, and of course to set standards for establishing new services and new one-stop shops. Of course, this is a challenge, but also all these things are challenges and opportunities for our countries, and countries are individually faring better in some of these aspects, and perhaps in some of them they are faring worse. For example, we have in Albania, where performance data dashboard exists and this data is published. We have legally binding use of quality management tools in North Macedonia, etc. So individually, when we dive into the practice of individual countries, there are, of course, good examples, and there are promising developments. But overall, these are some of the elements that we believe still need to be looked after, monitored, and improved in order to boost this let's say increasingly this increase in moving towards designing services that are adapted to the needs of real people and their preference, and for the benefit of the society in general. So this is it for me, and I am really looking to hear your questions and thoughts to our research and survey results. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Milos, for this very rich presentation. I think it's always great to see the work that you and all the colleagues in CEP and Weber by enlarge what you're doing. Also, well, nice, but no surprise. I mean, good to see that our findings also align. I mean, between our assessments, Sigma assessments, as I briefly introduced in the beginning, and then the more in-depth findings coming from your sides. I see in the meantime that Marina also provided some feedback on the Goran's earlier question, because Marina had to replace the minister. She texted me, so Goran, you should have a response in the chat. Maybe to Milos, if there are questions or feedback or any issues, I would say, to Milos and the presentation, I think the floor is open. So just wave your hands, and then happy to take these or drop some comments in the chat. In the meantime, while waiting for people to reflect and maybe come up with a question, I really like the I think the overall conclusions, Milos, that you put in terms of like common challenges and opportunities. I think this is also, I mean, where we started from, right? I mean, started from in terms of setting up this particular webinar, but also the ones following. And I will come back in a minute in some overall conclusions. But as you said, what we have also seen from Sigma's assessments is that in terms of the take-up of user engagement and feedback instruments, that there is a positive tendency, definitely. And we see in all the countries, not to the same extent, and this is for sure also something that you noticed, that the use of well, asking feedback to citizens, users on service delivery, this has been growing. It's not full-fledged and to the extent that we would like it to be, but it's growing. I mean, the attention is there. The same, but to a lesser extent on the systematic use of quality management instruments. Again, there are some countries, and you referred to them already in your presentation, some countries who have this already more installed than others. But the awareness is growing. So I take that as a positive note. The same in general on the human-centric and the human-centric design thinking. It would be unfair to say that this is really nowhere in the region. Again, that would be unfair. There are individual cases, organizations, ministries, agencies, who started to work on this, definitely. Even in some countries, there is more general awareness, definitely. But this overall human-centric design, there is still a lot of work in terms of awareness, in terms of building up capacities that needs to be done. And so to that extent, I think what we've seen today with individual people, like colleagues like Jolien, within ministries, agencies, organizations that really can take the lead in bringing this up to the managerial agenda, but also bringing this then within the colleagues and guiding the colleagues in implementing this way of doing. This is really where probably we will have to invest. I mean, all together as a region, but also as us international organizations supporting the region, where we have to do more. And then also in the role that Bruno with the OPSI, but also previously with LabX, also there we have seen within some countries some, well, first initiatives to build up this kind of innovation centers or experimentation centers to really support the whole dynamic in the country. This is also where countries really can take a step forward. And we hope that with this, well, webinars, we can just contribute in a modest way to all this, I mean, different kind of awareness, but also building the capacity and hoping that also in a systematic way, this whole way of doing in general will be supported and taken up at the end of the day. I think concretely in your presentation, Milos, I think it's interesting to see that like the e-service, on the one hand, there is an appetite in society, let's call it like this. But then if you then see the uptake, it's fairly low in general. And true, as your correct remark on the impact of COVID, that organizations were forced to speed up, accelerate the offer and the online services. But still, that, as we all know, and that also clearly shows from, I think, your presentation, most vulnerable groups in terms of, well, accessibility, but also digital skills, they probably suffer most also from this whole, well, going digital in a very rapid way. So I think this is something where we have to be extremely cautious for. And therefore, again, the work that then Jolien, and therefore I was also so keen on having her, both from what she's doing in terms of the skill set, but also in the area in which she's working, that I think this is also in the Western Balkan region, an area, I mean, well, the most vulnerable people in our society, where we have to be really attentive for, and where this all human-centric design approach might make a really big difference in the area of service delivery. So I hope that also with this webinar, we can contribute to this well, way of thinking and the stimulus in getting this thinking also into the countries. So I'm looking, so thanks once more, Milos, for really the great contribution. Really appreciate it. I'm also looking to the chat, or to the colleagues that are still online with us, if there are any things that you would like to bring up at this late hour. I know we're running towards the end, but if there's anything that you would like to bring in from the whole morning, basically, in terms of comments, in terms of questions still that you have to any of the speakers, or in general, this might be the appropriate and right moment. I don't see anything for the moment. So let me then try to be, I see Goran. Yes, Goran. Can always count on you, Goran.
No, I was just wondering, you mentioned at the very beginning what might be the topics for the future events. I was definitely inspired what happens beyond the curtains once human-centered design or participatory approach that Milos just explained is taking over the process. So knowing that pandemic and this new normal or a global reset that is upcoming will shift from what we knew to something that is quite different. And this disruption technologies and digitalization, teleworking, and all other, so to say, aspects will bring in not only, so to say, to optimize the processes and optimize the services, which is the focus, but also we would need to, as mentioned today by Bruno, to go more towards designing the resilience systems, and I think Aline also mentioned it. So this, I would also like to hear in the future context what will happen in designing new and defining new organizational complexities, because it is equally important, if I may say, to the end product and to the users in the way we just talked today, because there is so many differences and so many aspects that we need to take care of in order to rebuild the system and to make the adaptable ecosystem of public administration. So my proposal would be to think whether in some of the upcoming events, new patterns of setting the and running the organizational complexity in PA ecosystem might be an interesting topic for me, at least.
Super, thank you, Goran, for this this kind proposal. On which I can fully adhere, and which I appreciate. I also took some notes indeed on these elements that Bruno, I mean, that all colleagues mentioned, and the importance of the whole skill set, but also mindset, both in terms of us as public administration. I mean, we are like a small group that to which we are in a way preaching to, or the already converted, right? But there are probably many other colleagues that we need to get on board in terms of mindset and also skill sets. But the same applies to the well, call it outside world, towards and civil society, to involve them, to motivate them, but also users, to get them involved, to motivate them, and then how to organize this into a more, as you call it, Goran, the whole well, ecosystem, right? So I think this is really definitely something that we can look into for the future, and as kind of an interesting future topic that we can schedule, definitely. I will, at the very end, to which we are slowly progressing, I will repeat this, this request or question for other topics to be proposed as well by you as participants. So let me, in terms of trying to conclude, share my, briefly share my screen. I promise that try to end punctually on time. So I hope you can see the screen. Yeah. Colleagues who have attended some of other sessions, they might recall this this slide, but I think it's still also valid in this webinar, but also making the link between the next ones. I think one thing that has become very clear in the whole, well, human centricity and in the design thinking is really starting from not thinking for them, and them being the users and the citizens, but really doing the thinking together with them. And this is by really to get an in-depth understanding and insights, but more than insights, it's the understanding of what the users' needs and expectations are in terms of the services, but also the way services are delivered. And so getting a really deep understanding. So not thinking on behalf of them or for them, but really doing this with them. Only then we can try to work on improving the processes, simplifying procedures, simplifying processes, really aligning the way of doing and delivering services, responding or corresponding to the needs and expectations of the users. Improving this by things that we heard, co-creation, experimenting, testing. I think this is really a key aspect of this. Increasing the accessibility. I think this also came across in Milo's presentation, that in terms of accessibility, being it physical, being it online, that this is really a key aspect. So territorial, but also one-stop. So the element of accessibility, bring this in. This is crucial. The aspect of using the whole E, and this is an aspect that we will bring into the next webinar. As I mentioned before, the aspect of digital identity, and with that trust services is key for the region. I mean, the region has made big steps forwards in terms of digital. Definitely, this is what we have seen in our assessment, Sigma assessments, also came across in Milo's presentation. Yeah. Like one element that will be really key for taking it into the next step and the next level. This is really investing into digital identity, signatures and trust services overall. With this, of course, also comes the biggest aspect of the security, cybersecurity. So this will be all key elements that we will put forward in our next webinar, on which I will come in a second in the next slide. So this is what we will schedule definitely there. And then, of course, and that comes back to after also this aspect of experimenting, the testing, the implementation, also the aspect of continuously asking for feedback and for, well, proactively asking for assessment, for feedback from the users in order to really improve this. So really to close the cycle. With all of this, there come a lot of tools, instruments, way of doing this. Many of them have been already mentioned, and even much more have been mentioned in the course of today's webinar. So I will not go into repeat and into detail go into all of them. There's plenty of these that have been documented and illustrated and that you can find. So the multi-channel one-stop shops has been set, interoperability, moving towards digital by default, and then the whole charter approach, measuring approach, which will be the last point. This will be the aspects of our third webinar, setting standards, but also measuring against these standards. This is what we'll be looking at doing in the third webinar. So just to conclude from my side, what we will do is that we will send you after this webinar, we will send you all the materials via email, all the presentations. Also, the full recording will be online in the next days. So if you want to see this again, but also if you want to send this to other colleagues who couldn't attend, it will be online first. With this, we will also send you the invitation to sign up for the second webinar with the concrete agenda. So this will be in your inbox in the near future. And then the third webinar, this we will be working on. So this will come later. What would be really nice from our side is that if you have any ideas for future topics, and like the one Goran already came up with just a minute ago, if you have any ideas or particular questions, or you say, well, it would be great to deepen out this tool or this methodology, or what about this particular aspect, or how do countries in the EU or in the region deal with this particular thing, please feel so free and kind to send them directly to me, to us. And happy to see how we can build up a dedicated webinar, really focusing on a particular case, on a particular question. Happy to support in such a concrete way. So that's the first thing. If you have any questions, demands, send them. On the other hand, if you have anything to offer in terms of what I would call inspiring practice, something that you have been working on within your country, your administration, your agency, your organization, and you say this could be interesting for others in this area to know, also attract our attention. We hope that we are quite on top of things and that we have identified these in our work. But nonetheless, if you think you have something to offer, something to share with others, please attract our attention. Happy to follow up bilaterally, and then we can also maybe put this in the agenda for one of these next webinars. Be so free, be so kind, don't be humble and modest, attract our attention to this. So please do that, reach out to us directly. Before ending, let me also kindly attract your attention, besides these two webinars that we do as part of this series, that we will be launching a high-level event online towards the end of the month, the 28th of April to be precise, which will be related to the digital government transformation in the Western Balkan region. The program is ready. We have all the speakers confirmed, and it will be sent out in the next couple of days. Besides high-level speakers from the region, we also have high-level speakers from the European Commission. We have high-level speakers from neighboring countries in Slovenia, not to mention it already. And we also have the case from Estonia. So the former the Chief Information Officer, Sim Sikut, I think, who is really an authority in the world on this, he has confirmed to make a keynote presentation in that event. So note down the date already, 28th of April, in the morning, 10 till 12. We will have this high-level event on digital government transformation in the Western Balkan region. So with this, we have used all our time. From my side, let me just conclude by thanking all the speakers. So from Bruno in the morning over Jolien, Marina, Milos, really, really appreciate it. I think it was extremely, extremely rich and insightful. So many thanks for being here, preparing in such a professional way. Really excellent, great to see. Allow me also to thank the interpreters for the long morning. Great job done. So many thanks for this. And finally, also allow me to thank Goran, because behind the scene, Goran Pastovic has been supporting me and us as Sigma in really designing all of this. in thinking, but also in looking for the speakers, doing the preparations with the speakers. So really, really appreciate it, Goran. So thanks for this input. So with this, colleagues, many thanks. I wish you a great afternoon. We stay in contact. You will see us over email, and hope to also count on you as participants and actively contributing in the next webinar, 31st of May, but maybe before. Already see you at the 20th of April in the other online event. Thank you so much for now. Take care, stay healthy, and we'll be in touch. Thank you. Thanks so much.